Hi, Intuitive viewers. Hello. I am so excited to talk to you today because I have a special guest. It is Kim Forrester, who I greatly admire first for her podcast, but also she's written this book that we're going to be talking about called Infinite Mind. And first, I want to just tell you a little bit about Kim. She has an amazing podcast called Eudaimonia. And on that, she talks to a lot of spiritual teachers, inspirational figures. It really is about flourishing in your own life. And so there's a lot to gain from that podcast. We had a fun discussion about knowing and being intuitive, and so that is first, and then we're going to talk about your book, Kim. But welcome to the channel.
Oh, Kim, that was the most beautiful, delicious introduction. Thank you so much. I am humbled and grateful. It's just a delight. I love what you bring to our world through the YouTube. You know, obviously, I normally live in Singapore. I'm in New Zealand at the moment, and your beautiful, graceful, shining face appears on my YouTube all the time, and you're just such a delight. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Well, that's so nice of you to say. Thank you, Kim. I really appreciate that. And I want to first ask you about your own abilities, because I feel like from reading the beginning of your book and also the conversation that we had, I kind of feel like it's taken you time to get used to the idea that you have this connection. But can you talk a little bit about that process of kind of getting used to the idea, and also how you kind of, what finally tipped you over the edge of like, okay, these are abilities. This is something a little bit different. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, growing up here in New Zealand, and I had always assumed that psychic ability, you know, intuitive abilities came in the form of visions. Okay. you hear tales of clairvoyance and, you know, having these incredible visionary meditations or seeing spirit, or, you know, and so I thought that's what being psychic was. So I had no clue that I had any sort of intuitive ability at all. When I was 26, when I was 16, I went to a tarot reader, and he told me that I was incredibly, you know, we're all psychic, but that I had a really strong connection, and I just laughed at him. I went, "You're out of your mind." And when I was 26, I sort of drawn, you know, you get these little yearnings, these callings, and I was drawn to a meditation spiritual development circle. So I'm 26 years old here at this point, no clue.
Right.
And once again, I go along and we're sending messages to each other at the end of the night. And I'm looking for visions. I'm going, what can I see in my mind? And literally, I do remember, and I know I wrote it in the book, I literally one night turned around and said to the lady next to me, "I see broccoli." You know, did you have broccoli for dinner tonight? And I was just awful at it. I was terrible. And I realized it was afterwards. I actually got moved away, but my life moved me away from that town and that circle. And then I started my own instruction, and it started with tarot cards. And over time, I realized, after the tarot cards, then all of a sudden I was sensing spirit nearby. I was sensing that there was an essence of someone who had passed near me, and on it went. And then I realized I didn't really need the cards. The information was coming through, and the cards were just a tool that I was using to connect. What I realized, Kim, is that we all do it differently. We all have this quantum connection, or this super consciousness that we are connected to. We're all downloading this information all the time, and it speaks in our language. So I don't see things. I don't get visions, but my word, my emotions tell me everything I need to know. Like, I get this, I just know, you know, by how I feel what's going on. And then as I was paying attention, I realized my own inner monologue was giving me words. so I was I became a professional intuitive, as you are, right? So I started, and I'd be sitting there and I would feel the presence of a Nana, as if Nana had walked in the room, right? And then I would get a name, Ruth, in my head.
Right.
And so the more I realized what my language was, the stronger these abilities became. And then the stronger these abilities became, the more I strengthened my own natural ability, the more I realized that it's not just about, knowing which holiday destination is going to be most, beneficial, or is my boyfriend cheating on me? This connection connects us with the source. This is our connection to the universe, to God, to whatever you want to term it. And it's not just stuff that it's wisdom that you can download. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Right. That's so, and I think that's such a good point that you make about, I was expecting this and that wasn't what I got. And I think that happens to a lot of people. They think it's one thing, or they just think they're waiting for something really big to happen. And it's very subtle. It's not big and grand. It can be sometimes, but a lot of it, I try to tell people it's going to be so you. It's going to be you. It's going to be part, it's things you're interested in, things you're tuned into, if it's music, or if it's, certain writings, or if it is, writing, it's going to be very you. It's not going to be me. It's not going to be what I do. It's not going to be what somebody else does. And I do think people are, it's sometimes people's expectations that can throw them off for a while. Looking for something else that they're just not attuned to, rather than just kind of digging into their own gifts. So how did you was there a turning point where you realized, okay, I don't see things, I feel things? Was there a certain, like, one big event, or was it just kind of a rolling out?
It was a building of trust, Kim. And I love that you say it's not me, it's you, because what I would say to your viewers is that there is nothing more you than the knowing that flows through you. In fact, it is so comfortable. It is so aligned with who you are that I think that's why people often miss it or mistake it. They go, that's just my thought. But that's because there is nothing more authentically you than the connection you have with all that is. And I just started listening and trusting more to those subtle, really subtle moments. And then, of course, the more I trusted, sometimes I would get a whammo of a piece of information. However, even when you get a whammo of information, sometimes you can justify that away if you are not truly trusting the information as it comes through. Oh, Kim, and you know as well as I that sometimes the information when it comes is so illogical, or it looks really scary. Are you asking me to make that change in my life? So there's a huge trust that gets built up over time.
Right. I think that's beautifully put. And I also want to make clear too that when you have this, when you're plugged in and you're I say guides, but people say all kinds, the source, angels, whatever you want to say. When you have these offerings of wisdom and direction, it's still your choice. You don't have to act on anything you're given. You can, and it usually makes your life easier, but it's always your choice. Don't you? I found that very interesting, because I think sometimes people think it takes you over. you have to do what it says, and you really, really don't. You really are the master of your own universe, but you have this little access point, like you said, into something that's just a little wiser, that you can tap into and you can use if you want to, and you cannot use it if you want to. I always feel like I usually do listen to it, because but there are times that I've been like, oh, maybe not, maybe I'll do this later or something, I'll kind of, so how do you feel that as well? Do you feel like, okay, it's always my choice, but I have this access that gives me something, is maybe just a little more knowing or a little wiser?
Look, absolutely. And brushing our teeth every morning is what's best for us. And sometimes we skip a day, right? And not having that third glass of wine at night, we know it's best for us not to do it, but sometimes we choose to do it anyway. We know that what's good for us is to go for a walk for 30 minutes, out in nature,
right.
But we choose not to. So when the information comes through for me, and I've learned to trust that advice, I've learned to trust the knowing, because it leads me nowhere but to greater fulfillment. It's never done me wrong. But sometimes I know what's best for me and choose otherwise.
Right. And it's our own journey. It's our own, we're building our own path. And so I think sometimes you just kind of have to test it and just see what, I don't think I'm going to do that, but let me see what happens. And I always feel like they're trying to get you on the more joyful, easier path, because we're all going to experience difficulty and hardship in our life, no matter what. And I just feel like they really are trying to guide us in a way that is still our path, but it's just a little bit easier, a little bit more joyful, maybe. Do you get that impression as well?
Absolutely. And I want to share too that I think one of the most powerful things about our intuitive connection is that even when life is not joyful, because life is not always going to be easy, the challenge is part of the experience, pain is part of the experience. However, that's when that little voice steps into me and goes, just wait and see how this pans out, right? Or check in and see what you're gaining from this. Trust us.
Right.
I normally live in Singapore. I'm here in New Zealand at the moment dealing with, what has been a really intense family situation. And it was really interesting flying over here. And I landed, and the person that I came here to be here with, sort of turned around and said to me, well, you're not here for me, you're here for you, right? So that's the words that were given to me. So I was told that I'm not here for this person, I'm here for me. And over time, those words started echoing around in my intuitive thoughts. I'm here for me, I'm here for me. And I went, oh, that was a message. That was a message. I get it now. I'm here for me. So, even though life looked like it brought me here for a specific reason.
Right.
I'm here for me. What am I gaining from the situation that I'm going through? And so it's just things like that. I think it's not just about being on the joyful, easy path. It's that wise advisor that's on your shoulder and in your heart and is saying, this is tough, and one day you will know why. Or this is tough, and this is why. This is how we want you to grow into a greater version of yourself.
Right. And I think that's a perfect, illustration of this year for a lot of people. I think 2020 was a year where there was a lot of personal growth on a large scale. I think people learned so much this year, but it was very hard. It was very difficult. But I just think that it really was a time of personal, spiritual growth for a lot of people. Don't you think so?
Absolutely. I've often said that if we had chosen to come out the end of the year the same person as when we went in, then we've missed an opportunity. I think the past 12 months were a golden opportunity for us to shed our skins and to shed that which no longer serves us, and to look at things in a different perspective and understand what our priorities and our values are.
Right. I think that's, beautifully put. And I kind of want to move from that into your book, because there are, what we're talking about, this kind of, I know I'm hearing something, or I know I'm getting a message, but it makes no sense, or it's completely, you know, in this book, you have a lot of people who really have never gotten clear messages like that before. So they're very, it's shocking to them or surprising to them. And basically, I'll just let people know it's a bunch of different stories of people having these kind of psychic experiences in different ways. So let me ask you, for me, it's such a fun book because it's almost like reading a bunch of Twilight Zone episodes, you know, with each one. they're also different, but fascinating and shocking. Some of them are very shocking, and you kind of you get to feel it through them because of how they react to the information. So I just thought that was such an interesting way to write each story. So how did you decide which stories to include in the book? Because I'm sure you probably came across a lot of these kinds of stories, but how did you decide which ones to include?
The universe brought them to me, and I mean that sincerely. I would find a story, I would read about it online, or I would be guided to Google a specific phrase. One of the stories in the book, I literally walked into a cafe. I just moved back to Singapore. I walked into a cafe and started chatting to a gentleman there. And somehow we got onto the book that I was writing, and he shared his story, and it ended up in the book. So it was...
Oh, interesting.
Every story in that book is meant to be in that book.
Right.
And yeah.
You feel it when you read it, you feel it. You really do. It really does carry with it its own energy, and you have your own experience when you read this book. Do you think that I kind of think that, you know, like you said, spirit had a hand in this book. And so I kind of feel like that's the point, is that we all kind of we're all going to pull out of it what we need to.
Yeah. You're making my body tingle. The whole, because of the truth of what you just said, the whole point of the book, and, you know, as you would have found, there are stories there of really well-known people that you wouldn't expect, right? And there are people who you will never know. They are literally people I met in a cafe. So, and there are people who are in history, and there are people who have had an experience in the last few years. It was a very, I'm going to say conscious, but it was a guided creation of a set of stories that encompasses anyone and everyone, because that's what I wanted people to understand. You don't have to be the famous psychic reader to have an experience. You don't have to be famous. You don't have to be the girl or guy next door. You don't have to be in history. It's happening to all of us in all of these different ways. And I was hoping that the reader would find somewhere in there an experience where they went, oh, that happened to me, or that's like that thing. But I had justified it away and hadn't realized what it was at the time.
Absolutely. And I think that happens so often. I always tell people, whatever you felt in that moment, that's the truth. After that, your mind can undo it, can you know, figure out a way that, oh, it didn't really happen, or if you remember what you felt in that moment, because that is the truth.
Absolutely. There is a story in the book of a gentleman who gets that information in the moment and chooses not to heed the warning. You were talking about, you know, what happens if you do that, and obviously things happen, and you know, that whole chapter was designed to explain that we have a choice. And, well, I'm going to say we have a choice, but the issue, the challenge we have, Kim, is that choice is often made unconsciously for many people. Our logical mind steps in as the guard, you know, the keeper of the gate. We get this incredible information, and our logical mind, if we haven't been brought up to be open to this information, the keeper of the gate goes, well, you're a load of rubbish, I'm not listening to you, right? And rejects it outright. And because that's deeply embedded in the way that we think in our logical mind, I think it's important for people to understand that it is influencing the way that we deal with this information. And we are making a choice, but we're not doing it consciously or carefully. You know, if our logical mind is just shutting out this information, there needs to be a conscious reversal of that process. We need to consciously come back and start listening to the information, however it presents itself.
I think that is, beautifully put. And I want to ask you about two stories in particular, because I feel like they would probably resonate with most people. One is Edwina from Little Rock, Arkansas. She is the one that is, oh wait, no. Let me start with Jasmine. Jasmine is the one who has a dream about holding a little baby. Her parents are there, and she's sitting up in this hospital bed holding this little baby. She looks down at the baby. The baby looks nothing like her. So she's like, this is weird, but the dream sticks with her. And I think so many people have psychic dreams because, and you kind of go into this and kind of the explanation is because we are so wrapped up in the drama of our lives and our daily lives that it's the only way they can get through sometimes. So I just thought that was such an interesting story, but yet probably one that a lot of people can relate to when that dream just sticks with you for some reason. And then when it happens, you're like, oh my gosh, you know, but it is one way I think guides can get through to you when you're not reachable any other way for whatever reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And and as I write in that chapter, so studies have shown that more than half of spontaneous psychic experiences come through dreams. And that is because the gatekeeper has gone to sleep, right? The logical mind has got out of the way. And so that beautiful intuitive, which is also our creative self, right? So that flow goes, oh, thank goodness. You know, you keep ignoring the signals I'm sending you, or you keep thinking about dinner or going to the park or walking the dog or drama. So I haven't been able to talk to you. Now that your logical mind is demobilized, here's the information, and I'm going to put it in symbols for you. I'm going to put it in dream language for you. But you're right. It's not every dream, but you know when you've had a psi-based dream, a psychic dream, because you're right. It's sticky. It's really sticky. Yeah.
Right. And visitation dreams are the same way, where you have a visitation from a loved one. They stick with you in a way that it's not like a dream. Usually dreams will fade. When you have something like that, it sticks. It becomes like a memory more than a dream, where it kind of just fades after a couple of days.
And a memory that is demanding to be acknowledged. I think that's, you know, the stickiness is there until you accept what that experience was, in which case it just sort of, it dissolves and it becomes part of yourself. But I think that stickiness is almost like a crying out from that information or from your super consciousness, right? Pay attention to me, I'm important. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And then, so I wanted to shift to Edwina, who I just mentioned before. Now, not all of these experiences are life and death, and usually they're not life and death. So you can kind of follow them and see where your instincts are leading you, or you're kind of learning to trust. And so you can play with it a little bit. This one in particular was powerful because it was life and death. She was sitting in her, doing what she did every single day. She would grab a beer, sit in front of the TV for a few hours. She had a stressful job, so she'd sit there and unwind for a few hours. And this particular night, she got a loud clairaudient message that was like, go to bed. So she listened to it, went straight to bed. heard some gunshots in the background and thought, oh, wow, that was close. That seemed close, and then she got up the next day and noticed there was actual bullet holes in her. I can't remember if it's in the window or the wall, but it was one of those things where, I mean, I'm sure it took her breath away and she was glad she listened. And not everything is dramatic like that. But what I thought was interesting was how you kind of explained clairaudience, because I think a lot of people think clairaudience is a voice from the outside, and clairaudience is from the inside. It really, it's almost like a louder thought. It really, but it does.
Yes.
I have a lot of clairaudience, and it does feel like, I always say, my mind's ear. It's because it's in my mind, but it's definitely, there's something about it that feels like you're hearing it. So, and talk about that case a little bit, because I just thought that was really very dramatic. Like I said, not all of them were that dramatic, but a really interesting experience for this person. And yeah.
Well, it's interesting. So I'm like you, my clairaudience is all inward. However, there are two other stories in the book that you might remember. And one of them is a lady who's driving the car. For her experience was an external voice. Well, obviously, it's actually her brain creating it. But the way that her brain creates it is as if a voice is talking to her from the outside. That's not something I've experienced myself. But there's also occasion there where, well, there are occasions like I had when I was told, you're here for you. I do believe that sometimes too we will hear the lyrics of a song on the radio.
Right.
And all of a sudden, but you become aware. Your awareness switches to those lyrics, or your awareness switches to part of a conversation. Right. And in my experience, I regard that kind of as clairaudience as well, because you're being asked to hear a message. But yeah, Edwina's story was phenomenal. I stumbled upon her when I was living in Sydney, and she was too. And I did feel, look, I've had messages that are that emphatic that you cannot ignore them. You were saying we have a choice, except in those moments where it is essential. It is essential for you, whether, to save your life or to build a life. We get messages that are too clear to ignore. Our gentle, loving, we can still choose not to. She could have not stood up and gone to bed. But I think sometimes if someone you trust is giving you advice, and then someone you trust says, do this now. You don't question it. You do it now.
You just do it. Do you have any favorite, stories that kind of stuck with you, or any favorite stories from your book that you just felt like, this is, I will not forget this. This is insane, or just something you came across that you thought was particularly interesting?
I thoroughly enjoyed my interview with Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who was the sixth man to walk on the moon, and he's the gentleman who had an experience. He was doing experiments. He was doing telepathy experiments out in space in the Kitty Hawk, and he had an epiphany that led him to create the Institute of Noetic Sciences that for the last 40 years has been studying empirically in laboratories, these watertight experiments that have proven without any scientific doubt, right, that this exists in us all. And I think, just for me, I mean, the story itself is probably not one of the most, overwhelming or mind-boggling. But my experience of connecting with him, and he passed 2 weeks before the book was published.
Oh gosh.
There was just enough time to put an acknowledgement in the front of the book. But for me, connecting with someone who has done so much for the cause, and not a spiritual person, this isn't a spiritual man who's done so much for the cause like Deepak Chopra has, I'm talking about a scientist. He was a pilot, and a physicist, and an astronaut. And in his beautiful scientific way, he actually then came back and did more for the cause, I think, of us tapping into our spirituality than many other people have.
Right. And that is a great one. And I think that we had this conversation. I can't remember. I think it was when we talked before on the podcast, but I think it was before we were talking, because I don't think it's in the podcast. But I've gotten the message several times over the last year that this is the time where, and meaning this is the time over the next few years when science is going to meet the paranormal. Science is going to meet this spiritual. It's time for this to happen. Do you get that feeling as well?
Oh, that is why the book is created. I'm sure of it. I am just one of many messengers who is being asked to deliver, to deliver the message that science and spirituality have actually been trying to describe the same events, the same phenomena, but in different ways. Can I share an analogy with you and your viewers? Because I think
absolutely, please.
I think I am aware, so I don't like to upset people, and I was aware as I was writing the book, particularly in the beginning, and I say, we experience things like spirit guides and angels and whatnot. However, and I say, that is our mind. That is how we experience that. And I thought, that's going to be really confronting and upsetting for some people, because the experience of talking to one's guide or chatting to the angels, that's very real and very visceral and really beautiful for people. So I don't want to take away from that experience, but I'm going to use the analogy of lightning. So if you are standing, because I've lived in Asia some time, I've been very near lightning strikes. And when you're right near a lightning strike, you get the hairs on your back stand up. You get this electrical sort of wave run through you. And then there is this crack, absolute crack. And then this overwhelming sort of bright light comes down. So that's your experience if you are near a lightning bolt. If you are a couple of kilometers, a mile or so away, you see a flash in the sky, and then soon afterward you hear a boom. If you are several kilometers or several miles away, you might not even see the flash in the sky, or you're inside. You get a rolling rumble, right? So the experience is lightning. That is the event. The event is lightning. Right. But depending on where you are, you experience it differently. And each of those experiences over time, because there was no science to explain what lightning was, each of those experiences had a story built up around it. So if someone experienced the lightning bolt, well, that was God smiting someone. Right?
Right.
The rolling of the thunder from, many miles away, that was Thor running across the sky in his chariot.
Right.
We built stories around each of those experiences, but they're actually they are different perspectives of the one event. Right. And science has now explained that the one event is the buildup of static energy in the clouds because of the molecules bouncing against each other, and the buildup of energy needs to be discharged, so the electricity arcs from the sky to the ground. That's the scientific explanation for it. And then you have all these different experiences of it, and all of the different stories that have built up around those experiences. You can see where I'm going here, right?
Yeah.
Science is going to tell us, when this is all figured out, science is going to tell us that the information we receive is some kind of quantum mechanism, or some kind of transformation, not transformation, some kind of transmission of consciousness data. And that sounds really boring, but that will be what the science will tell us. That's kind of the theories. Those are the theories that are building up.
Right.
Some of us experience that transmission of data as a spirit guide, others as an angel.
Right.
Some get an intense feeling. Many Indigenous people around the world will say it's their ancestors that have come to them.
Right.
Totem animals. So depending on how you experience that transmission of data, it depends on the story that you've built up around it. I don't want to take away from those experiences because they're beautiful. Hearing thunder roll over your house is the most exhilarating, thrilling, beautiful experience. Let's not take that away. However, we can also understand, we can choose to understand that the cause of it is this little physical mechanism. And in the same way, I want people to enjoy and love and thrive in their intuitive experiences. I just think it's really helpful if we understand that that experience is our perception of data exchange. And when we do that, it does two things. First of all, it opens us up to evolve, as you have, Kim. You used to experience it as God. And then you allowed yourself to evolve. You went, oh, the event is still the same, but my perception of that, my experience of that, I'm going to change. I'm going to allow me to change. So it allows us to evolve. And it also allows us to understand that everyone else is doing it differently, but it's the same experience.
Right.
And then it takes away any sort of judgment or exclusion or, in any of those human things that we do, when we understand we're all experiencing the same scientifically explained mechanism or event, and we're experiencing it differently. That was a really long answer, but
I think that's beautifully put, because you need to honor every experience somebody has. You need to honor that, but there can also be a way that science can explain it. And it doesn't mean that it's any less valid. It just means that it's a different perspective, really. It's the science perspective. And it's all good, but it is converging. And I think that I think that's beautifully put. I think that's, exactly. So Kim, where can people find you? Find your podcast, find your book? Where can they find all of these wonderful things that you've done?
If people want to go to kimforrester.net, that's where they will find me. And so I've got links to my podcast there. This year I invite people to join me on Facebook or Instagram. I don't really have a big YouTube channel, but Facebook and Instagram, I've decided this year to do these little bite-sized thrives. So 3 or 4 times a week, there's going to be a little video from me as I go through the sort of journey of, enhancing my well-being after the year that we've had. And so each week I'm focusing on a specific topic. This week it's self-compassion. And so I'll be offering little tips. And then if people want to go to the podcast and listen to the full interview, then they can do so. But kimforrester.net, that's where I am. That's where I'll be.
And that's what this is. I mean, we are just kind of evolving. We're all kind of, as you talk about the projects you're doing and the way you're kind of reaching out in different ways. And I think that's a perfect example of how we are, our abilities, the way we use them, the way we look at them, how we're trying to communicate with one another and reach out to each other. It's all an evolution, right?
Absolutely. And because we're all experiencing life differently, there are many different voices coming at it from many different angles and in many different ways. The same message, and we're all being called to do it our way. And thank you for doing it your way, Kim.
Right. You're sure. I can't do it any other way. So, well, thank you, Kim, Kim, for what you do. Thank you so much for what you do and what you offer. I think it's so valuable at this time in particular. I think it's so valuable, and I hope that people listen to your podcast and read your book, because they're such wonderful, authentic offerings to people. So I really hope they partake in that. But thank you so much for what you do, Kim.
It's just been a blessing chatting with you, Kim. And to all your viewers, you're beautiful, you're precious, you are loved, and whatever's going on in your life, you will endure, because you're human, and that makes you miraculous and amazing. Be well.
Thank you. Thank you, intuitive viewers. Take that in. Okay, we'll see you. Thank you.